Good morning. Welcome to Triumph Palace Live. I'm Richard Baker. I'm the conservator here at Triumph Palace. Today, I'm going to show you how we care and take care of some of the statues in the gardens around the site and around our properties. If at any time you have any questions about what I'm doing, why I'm doing it, or anything else regarding statues, please don't hesitate to put it in the chat and we'll see if we can answer it later. First thing I'm going to do is tell you sort of what some of our statues are. We have several statue, sculpture, architectural pieces around the property of the palace, the Stanley, our gardens, and even out at Claremont at the state burial site. The materials in these sculpture pieces include, we have limestone, we have Pompeii stone, which is a variation of limestone, we have marble, we have sandstone, we also have cast concrete, terracotta, and another one that I can't think of right now. We also have brick, a lot of brick things. We have some granite out on the property. And so all of these stone, brick, concrete materials need to be cleaned, actually on a more regular basis than some of the stuff inside the houses, because outside stuff is hit with rain, wind, materials from animals, different kinds of effects can get on the outside statuary. Now, when I say I clean it, I try to do this once every 4 or 5 years, because the materials of some of these statues are friable, they're very loose, they can fall apart, and so we have to be very careful about how we handle and how we clean the statues and the sculpture here in the gardens. So first of all, I'm going to talk about some of the materials that we use in doing this process. I'm wearing nitrile gloves right now, and sometimes wearing nitrile gloves is more for my benefit than for the statue. The statue can really, except for marble, most statues can handle my hands just fine. But for me, with some of the materials that I'm using, I'd rather prefer to use nitrile. In addition, I can also use a heavier glove as well. I also have eye protection, which I'm going to put on. This is to protect my eyes from some of the materials that I'll be using splashing around on my face and on myself. I want to get that in my eyes. We have different brushes that we use that can really help to work the surface. These are soft bristle brushes. We have some smaller ones as well, and we'll go down to even the size of a toothbrush that you use at home for cleaning surfaces. Some of the soaps that we use, first one is Orvis. Orvis is actually a synthetic detergent that has a neutral pH. Normally it's used in conservation on fabrics and rugs and that sort of thing, but mixed with water actually works very well, and that's what we have used in the gardens for many years on the statues. Volpex, which has a much higher pH, is also a detergent. Because it has a higher pH and because of what it's made of, it can actually be used in not only water but also some solvents as well. And usually when I use that, I mix it just with water, but you can mix it with something higher, especially if you're working with, say, bronze or a metal or something like that. And then going up from that, a product we use now, we just started using the last year or so, is this D2 Biological. The D2 Biological is actually contains materials that are safe to work with, safe to use. They use this on cemeteries, on gravestones. They'll give a bunch of this to a Boy Scout troop or a Girl Scout troop or a local charity organization to go out and clean all the headstones in the garden. And so it's very safe to work with. It actually works in 2 different ways. One way, it could be just sprayed on the surface, walk away, and let the rain and time take the material down. It really works well on lichens and some of the bacterial materials that get onto the surface and harden up. It's really good on that. The other way you can use it is you can spray it on the surface and start cleaning it right away. The statue that I'm working on today actually was sprayed with some of this back in February and then let it sit. Months, a couple of March went by, most of April has gone by. This morning I sprayed some more of this on to give us some fresh amount for today. And then I can use it in addition if I need a little more. I might use some of these others as well. All very safe to use together. That's the other important thing. And then additionally, water. This is distilled water. We also have tap water. I have tap water in a pump that I'll be using just to give a rinse. But distilled water can be used as well. And then we have little tools. Skewer, just a basic wooden skewer, is really good for working the surface, especially if there's a lichen that's about to come off, and we can use just a little bit of help. The skewer, for the most part, will not damage the stone surface, but you still have to be careful. Sometimes you can use metal dental tools as well to really get into a pit or something to kind of break up a growth or something. And then we have these little sponges. These little sponges are actually used with horses or for cleaning saddles and leather, things like that. These can actually be used on terracotta surfaces, which we're working on today. So those are the materials and some of the products that I use. Most of cleaning statue is just time. We have a volunteer who has worked on the statue I'm going to work on today, who spends hours and days working on it. I'm just going to spend a few minutes today working on it, and we'll see what results we get. But a lot of times when working on statues, it's a long process. It's not a go out in the garden, squirt the thing off, and you're done. There's really a process of time and what the water does to it. And even when you're finished, the water will remain on the stone. Most stone is very porous, it accepts water into it. And so when I do a statue, I'll clean it, let's say on a Monday when we're closed, and then I'll come back to it on a Wednesday or a Thursday to do my final photography, because it takes that many days to completely dry out. And then you see this completely different sculpture piece than you had when you started. So at this point, I'm going to turn over to cleaning this statue right here. This is a terracotta statue, dating to, I'm not sure when, I'm going to guess from the 1800s. It could be 20th century, I'm not sure. So with the terracotta is a earthenware material that's then been fired. These type of things before the 18th century were not glazed. After the 18th century, or at the 18th century, they start glazing them. This does not appear to be glazed to me, but it could have been at one point, and that has worn off over time. So I leave that at that. So to start, as I said, I had already squirted this down this morning. So what I'm going to do is wet it a little bit with the water and get right to it. I'm going to focus a lot on this berry area, because that's where you're going to see use of a lot of these materials that I brought. And I'm already seeing a little bit of change. I'm seeing some of these black dots disappearing. Stop every so often to get some more water. Refresh the surface. As you can see, the water is really activating that D2. It's been on the surface for a while, and so it's starting to oxidize a little bit. It's starting to bubble up, as you can see. Get into some of these nooks and crannies. There we go. Doing something. Now something, for those of you who may have caught my video on metals, something that I didn't do there that I'm going to do right now is make a little cotton skewer, a little Q-tip. So taking a little bit of cotton and my skewer, just do a pinch. And that's why this cotton is not very good. There we go. So basically what you're doing is you're making your own Q-tips. And then taking that, you can actually work down in some of these little spots. Yeah. Really work on some of that using the skewer, which is not going to damage the surface. And that really kind of works. Where I can't get the brush. And we're talking even along edges and ledges. Getting some stuff that and this is the stuff we traditionally sometimes used to use just a skewer by itself. Really work in there. And that is also breaking up. So it's not always just cotton. Sometimes you can just put the skewer in there. Now, if some of this stuff was a little harder to work with, that's the case where you would use some of the metal dental tools that I showed at the beginning. Yeah. Yes, stuff is breaking apart. Now, a lot of what you're seeing here, like this here, this is cobweb. That's been on the surface for a while and is now coming off. These statues such as these, because they're under trees, are going to be susceptible to a lot more, not damage, but a lot more deposits. Pollen in the spring, dead leaves in the fall, birds that get in the tree, do things. And so there's a lot of stuff that these things that are under trees are going to get more of and require more cleaning than some of the others. So now we're going to try one of these other cleaners. Try the Orvis. Get some of that in there. And this is the, as I said before, this is the synthetic detergent with a neutral pH. What a difference. And as I said at the beginning, I do have a couple volunteers that help me with this. And one of them has been doing this for years. And I have another one, a couple others that I have started training on this as well. Because when you're doing this kind of work, it's actually easier to split it up and have one person want to work on one statue while another is working on another. So we can get quite a lot done, even as slow as this can be. Now, as you can already tell, this is getting cleaner than this over here. So there's definitely some difference going on here. areas like this where it's collecting water while you're working on it. So that can be problematic because as you're pouring water on this thing and it's getting wet, if it starts collecting water, you really have to get that out. And so in cases like that, we actually have paper towels. Most of the water I've got out, but I've got the black stuff. The debris is still in there. There we go, get that. And of course, once I put water back on, that's what I collected then. It's a continual process of going from one to the other. The other thing to keep in mind when you're doing statues, just like when we do metals or even furniture, when you're cleaning something, you want an overall effect. You don't need to get stuck on one particular little area. You're really looking for the overall appearance. And so at the end, the visitor will see it is clean. They won't be, well, a spot over here on the back side. We certainly will try and get to everything that we can, but we want it, well, first of all, we want it to maintain the historic qualities of the piece. That's the whole point of conservation. And we want to make it, we're cleaning it to help it to sustain longer, so that we'll have a piece longer. You let it go, let it get dirty, things will start happening to the surface, it will start breaking down, and you know, things can break off. Here's an example right here where something has broken off. Now that may have been due to force, somebody may have hit it, but a lot of times it's going to break off over time on their own from just the effects of the environment. Some more of this. The Vulpix I do not use very often on statues. We have it. I've tried it a few times. It works better actually on granite. And I'm not really sure why that is, but it may be because granite is possibly not as porous as some of these other materials are. One place that I have found Vulpix to work, and Vulpix can be used on multiple surfaces. It's not specific to statues, stone, marble. It can also be used on wood, and I have used it on a wood floor in one of our exhibit buildings that had water stain, and it actually successfully removed or toned down the color of that staining, which is amazing. And that was right before candlelight programming, so we were able to get that a little more presentable than it had been before. Now for an area this size, we really kind of need to get a bigger brush. I'm going to go ahead and try a little more D2. This is the primary material we were using. Get that kind of in there and see how that works. Again, this is the material that you can spray on and walk away and not think about it, or move on to other projects. Or it can be used right away. It can be used either way. I used some D2 on the benches that are located by Canon. On the other side of the palace property. That was used in early July of 2019. After that, I let it go. And then in the fall, or actually it was I think December, somewhere in December, I revisited those benches and used the techniques we're using here with water, and found that D2 reactivated. This is after all the nor'easters that we had. This is after Hurricane Dorian came through. After all that rain, I was able to reactivate, meaning that the stuff suds up just like this. And it was amazing that it would stay on there for that length of time, despite all the rain that we've had. And so I've said that we would continue using that product in addition to several of the others that we use to continue to work on our statues. Right, see what happened there. In fact, for this one, I'm going to get my pump sprayer out. The pump sprayer is sort of an alternative to using a pressure washer or a hose. And so this allows me to bring water to the site without needing electrical connection or hose connection. Now, as far as pressure washers are concerned, we have used pressure washers in the past. The issue with the pressure washer is you don't want to use a very high pressure on statues. On some statues, I won't use a pressure washer at all. And now that we have the D2, I'm really trying to stay away from using it. I'll still use it on concrete. I'll still use it on some of our brick, being very careful of the mortar joints that they are not falling apart. But for this type of thing, the pressure that I get out of this spray canister is more than sufficient. Okay, up here we have some lichens, or the remnants of some lichens. So let's see what this stuff does to that. Kind of baked on the surface. Actually, going to get some of the Vulpex out, see what that does. Vulpex, amongst other things, has a very strong smell due to some of the chemicals that is working within it. And when I use the Vulpex, that's when I really want to have my eye protection on. That's when I really don't want to get this in my eyes. There are some chemicals that professional stone conservators will use, including things like sodium hydroxide, which we do not use here at all. That will burn your eyes out. In addition to melt your skin off. So there are some higher solvents that can be used. We don't do that here. That really needs to remain with trained professionals who know how to use those products safely. That usually also requires the user wearing a full bodysuit that protects everything. Now this is not really budding, but this is not really doing anything. Get D2 back. And again, as I said, These materials can be used along with each other. It doesn't cause any issues. Okay, I'm gonna get a bigger brush. This might be a good time to try the sponge. A little water on it. There we go. The surface of the terracotta, because this is a clay that's been fired, is actually a lot more, allows a sponge like this to be used. If I did this on a marble or a limestone surface, it would just tear my sponge to pieces. But because this is a much smoother surface, it allows a soft sponge like this to be used. And of course, because of that, the sponge is not doing anything damaging to the surface. It's a nice tool to use to really kind of go over where I've been, to get it a little more uniform, to get it a little more uniform. And some of the stuff that is on the surface may actually be remnants of that original glaze. The way that it's, what you can see now, especially in the light, you see there's some of it here, some of it down here, some of it over here, and then some speckles of it. So there's something that's still on the surface that is wearing off. It's sort of like when you look at a piece of furniture and you have remnants of paint. Or even looking at a piece of metal and you can see remnants of the lacquer. That is what I think I'm looking at right now. It's some remnants of possibly a former glaze or a colorant that was used on the surface. Now what I'm doing is not removing it, which is good. That means that we're maintaining the history of this piece. Certainly to go a step further and to preserve, stabilize, and keep that stuff from falling off further, that's where we would bring a stone conservator in to work on that, or a statue specialist. What we're doing here is just very basic conservation level, of course, but basic care and preservation of the surfaces. Okay, so this is cleaned up a lot more than it was. There's still areas of the black grime within the pockets, but for the most part, this is really cleaning up. And with the amount of D2 that's on the surface, more of this, as it dries and as time goes by, more of this may come off. We're just trying to loosen up. We're trying to introduce these different cleaners to the surface, and get the work started, and as time goes on, the rain and the wind will hopefully get more of it going. So as I'm finding with the skewer, we are loosening up more stuff. So what I'm going to do next, I'm going to work on this spot up here. This is what we can all see. This, has that dry appearance as the rest of the piece did when I started, and so we'll see what possibly can be done using some of the different procedures that we've used. Let us start actually with the oils. I'm going to start with a little bit of water. Now this is not, because this is a decorative piece, this area you've got all these grooves and pockets and holes. Not as decorative as the berries that you had below, but it's a very uniform mold there that's been used. And so with that, this is especially where we want it to be uniform, because when people look at it, they're going to see if we missed anything. I should add that all of these statues are cleaned on site in the gardens where they are. I have only brought a few things back to the lab, and that's because they broke, and I had to repair or remodel pieces for them, and that was only on some of our smaller statues. They get to a certain size where they cannot be moved easily, and so we just don't. We take care of them where they are. This is a medium-sized statue. We obviously have things that are larger. The statues that are the life size of a person are obviously larger. And then we have smaller. We have statues that are little fruit bowls. And the other material that I could not remember earlier is lead. We have a couple things made of lead, solid lead. And I know where those are from because we have copies of the catalog that you could purchase them from, still very early 20th century. But they were something you could purchase from England. I've also worked on outdoor sculpture made of bronze and copper at a previous place that I worked. And so there are all kinds of materials that you can see in outside exhibitry. Plaster is another material that shows up outside. Usually it's limestone, marble, sandstone, one of those that's most often seen. Concrete, all the versions of that. But there are many materials. Another area is the underside of these things, where you may not see, but they still need to be cleaned. And sometimes those are not as dirty as the top surfaces, because of course they're covered, but they still need to be gone over. Corvus. On this spot up here. That is being a little stubborn. generally, when we're cleaning, if an area is not coming up, we can try different materials. We can try a little more elbow grease, but we try not to use too much. We really don't want to damage the surface. As with everything in conservation, we really have to be careful how we interact with the surface of the material. So it's not a sort of get it done, it's more of a let's see what we can do, but we don't want to break it. And that's very much a lot of conservation. And it also involves a lot of testing, research, and experimentation on other material, other objects that may be more modern or maybe set up specifically as a test piece, so that we're not experimenting on the real thing. Okay, so now you've seen in about 30 minutes what can be done from here, a little bit of suds there, but from here down to about here. We've got clean. Compared to surfaces over on the sides or even below, there's, to me, an obvious difference. Now, it'll be more apparent, say tomorrow or another day when this is completely dried. But you can see from the surfaces at this moment that it's very shiny because of the reflection of the sun and the way the water coats the surface. So at this point, that's probably all I'm going to do for cleaning this. Now, if I was doing this as general cleaning, I would then turn and move on to another section of the piece to let this dry, to see how this does as I start working on another area. But for you watching this video, we can now turn it over to questions, if there are any.
All right. From Hadley, what kind of brushes are you using?
Okay, Hadley would like to know what kind of brushes I'm using. So these are different brushes. This is actually a nail brush. All the brushes I use have soft bristles. I'm not using any hard bristles or brass or steel or metal brushes. That would certainly be detrimental to the surface. So these are soft bristles. This is a nail brush. These are different just cleaning brushes. We also use, as I had said before, toothbrushes. Just the kind of toothbrush that you use to brush your teeth. We can use it to get into all these little nooks and crannies. So.
Question from Jan. How often do you clean the statues? Jan.
So someone would like to know, how often do I clean the statues? So statues like this one, there's actually two of them. This one and the one next to it. The terracotta urns are cleaned about every 2 or 3 years. Some of the dolphin fountain at the Stanley is cleaned every 5 years because it is in declining condition, and so we really have to keep an eye on that. We really don't want to do anything more detrimental to it. The Four Seasons, located in the Latham, in this same garden, the Latham Garden, I've actually never cleaned those. They are made of a very, they're made of Portland stone. They are actually, the surface of that material is actually crumbling. And so I have only started cleaning one of the statues recently using the D2, and that's a test case. Some of the other limestone or Pompeii stone statues around the gardens are cleaned about every 4 or 5 years. I try to not clean these things often. The other thing that I should point out, when I clean, say, one of the limestone statues, let's say I clean it right before Mumfest. So that's usually October of a calendar year. Let's say I clean it then, it will look that way in the spring of the next year. And come the fall of that year, you'll see what happens over that year with different pollen and dead leaves and stuff like that. But it'll look pretty good. Actually, a clean statue can remain looking good for several years. And so we just don't have to clean them as often, which is good, because we don't want to put these things in danger cleaning it every single year. That would be very bad. So.
From Pam, you had mentioned the pieces do chip off. Do you repair or replace a piece, and when is that decided?
Okay, so the question from Pam was, when things chip off or break off, do we repair them or replace them, or how is that decided? So I guess the best example of that, we had a piece at the other side of this garden where a gentleman, somebody was taking a picture and knocked it over and broke it. That was taken to the lab, and I repaired those pieces using different epoxies. Another piece, similar to it but smaller in size, another concrete piece, or it was a limestone piece, was knocked off a wall, and several of the pieces of fruit broke off. So in that case, the way limestone is sort of a calcium carbonate. It's a sedentary rock, comes from calcium carbonate, and so it's very much, when it breaks, it shatters. And when this thing fell over, these fruit pieces just shatter. They become powder. That cannot be really reattached. Some stone conservators can take that, mix it up into a new material, and reattach it that way. What I did in that case was I actually used concrete and made those pieces myself. I molded them to the shape using similar shapes from the other side as well, and put it back on, and then use a little colorant to get it to mesh in. On other pieces, we would probably bring in a professional conservator who specializes in stones to replace it. It was a hand or something more prominent on a larger statue. We would certainly do that.
From Kim, I love the birds. Are they trained to sing on cue?
Kim would like to know if the birds are singing on cue. The birds are actually more popular to this garden than anything else sometimes. And so, yes, I don't know if they're singing on cue or they're just messing with me, but they know that they own the garden, and we are just guests here.
That's it.
That's it? Okay. So, as I said, we've shown you how I clean a statue. This is a terracotta statue. We do what I did today on this is basically what I do on the other ones around the site and at our other properties. There is sometimes a little bit of a difference in materials or in technique, depending on the surface, but otherwise it's pretty much the same game. Going from there, I would say join us on Thursday when we'll have a tour of the Duffy Gallery for our Triumph House Live. And before you go, I would like to show you another statue that is actually completed. This statue over here is a marble statue that was cleaned last fall. And so this is what a completed statue cleaned with the D2 looks like. And so again, I'd like to say thank you for joining us here at Triumph House Live.